Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Jahnke. We just had a fun day of 11 games of football, some high-scoring games. It's the last week of the fantasy regular season. Hopefully you don't have to stress too much about Monday Night Football. I know I am not in that boat. I have a couple of matchups that I'll determine if I make the playoffs or not, and it'll all come down to Monday Night Football, so it'll be an interesting night tomorrow. But until then, we had a great day of games. As usual, we'll go through my top couple of takeaways from the day, answer any questions anyone has at the end, or at least the questions that I can. But there were definitely some interesting things at running back. A lot of players seeing more playing time than we're used to seeing, getting more carries than we're used to them getting. So we will go ahead and jump right into the Jacksonville Jaguars, where we saw Tank Bigsby have a large role in this game. He ran the ball 18 times for 55 yards and a touchdown. Also caught a pass where Travis Etienne only ran the ball 4 times for 20 yards, caught 4 passes for 50 yards. In terms of their playing time, things looked relatively normal for them. It looks almost identical to what happened last week, where the two pretty much split snaps on early downs. This week, Etienne had a little bit stronger of a hold on passing downs. Bigsby just a slightly more on early downs, but it was a huge trend in terms of touching the ball for Bigsby. This is something that we have not seen in the Jaguars backfield before. Bigsby has seen significant carries in games before, but they were all games where either Etienne didn't play at all or was injured and was limited in the game. And the only other games where Bigsby has ever seen double-digit carries were also games where Etienne saw double-digit carries. So this was the first time where Bigsby clearly dominated the running plays in a game where Etienne was also playing and presumably healthy throughout the game. So this was pretty big for Bigsby. Not great for anyone who had been trusting Etienne. Probably can't trust Etienne in your fantasy starting lineup if you still had him there. Now that we're reaching a point where no teams have bye weeks anymore, probably should be a bit easier to put him on your bench, where Bigsby is someone who could potentially be in fantasy starting lineups going forward. They have a couple of upcoming matchups where they should stay close in games. They're against teams that don't have the best records. They are some decent run defenses in there, so there is that factor to play into things, but he should still be getting a lot of carries, and they shouldn't be games where the Jaguars are getting so blown out that they abandon the run very early. So Bigsby available on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. I know I've mentioned him in my waiver article for a number of weeks. I think we'll continue to see this, and it'll be interesting to see heading into next season as well. A chance that the Jaguars could switch coaching staffs, which would really change how they could view their running back, since every coaching staff will want to do things a little bit differently. Maybe they bring someone else in to complicate things even further, but I think two players that are definitely interesting in terms of their dynasty value right now, since it's really hard to tell how they might use the running backs going forward, even beyond this season. Next running back situation is the Las Vegas Raiders, where Amir Abdullah and Zamir White were inactive for a third straight game due to injury. So it was again Sincere McCormick and Amir Abdullah taking the snaps in the backfield. And for the third straight game, McCormick got more involved than we had seen in previous weeks. Even last week, as the game progressed, we were seeing more and more of McCormick. And this week, it was almost all McCormick on early downs and short yardage situations, where it was Abdullah in almost all the passing situations. So this was great to see from McCormick. He ran the ball 15 times, 78 yards, also caught 2 passes. This is the second straight week where he had at least 60 rushing yards and averaged at least 5 yards per carry. And he is the only Raiders running back to do that this entire season. So even when the other Raiders running backs are healthy, I would expect McCormick to continue getting this high workload on early downs. The split between the two running backs was really reminiscent to early in the season with the Raiders, when Zamir White was dominating the early down snaps and Alexander Mattison was taking the passing down work. Even when both White and Mattison are healthy and ready to go again, would not be surprised if Mattison takes over those third down and 2-minute drill snaps from Abdullah. But I don't think Zamir White will see much of any playing time. wouldn't even be surprised if he's healthy and active once he is ready to go again, just because McCormick's played so much better this season that it makes sense to keep McCormick going. And Abdullah at least has the value on special teams. Madison probably the best receiving back, so still expect Madison to have a role in this offense. Still expect Abdullah to at least be active. So great to see for McCormick, and he is someone who is still available in a ton of fantasy leagues. I know in some of my deeper leagues he's been picked up. I trusted him in the Scott Fish Bowl and hopefully helped push me over the edge there, but I will be right at the cut down line there, but we'll see how things go. But in a number of other leagues, McCormick is still available and probably the top running back that I'd be considering off the waiver wire right now. The Raiders have a relatively good schedule for running backs the rest of the way. So I think McCormick can continue to see a lot of carries going forward and see a lot of production in those carries. So it's been great to see just anytime a player who has spent years either on the practice squad or injured, not get much NFL action, really take advantage of his opportunities to earn a bigger role in such a short period of time. Having all that work for him pay off over these years. Anytime we have those stories in the NFL, it's great to see. And in this case, it is also great for fantasy. Next running back situation I want to cover is the New York Jets, where we saw Breece Hall. He was inactive this week. So we saw Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis split time in the backfield. We kind of saw this coming last week when Davis was taking more snaps on third downs. Davis, someone who only played 6 snaps over the first 12 weeks of the season, then played, I think it was 12 snaps last week. So Davis, we knew he would get more involved. Looking at how they were used in situations, Davis the clear third down back. Also interesting that Davis took a lot of the short yardage and goal line work, where Allen was the clear early down back. So just based on that usage, I would have expected Allen to have a big advantage in the run game and Davis to have a big advantage in the passing game. Instead, it was a pretty even split. So even though they were used in specific times of the game, specific spots on the field, they still tried to keep a pretty clear mix of how the running backs were used. Allen ran the ball 11 times to 10 by Davis. Davis had one more target than Allen, but Allen ended up with one more catch with 4 catches compared to 3 catches. I do think if Breece Hall were to miss another game, Allen would probably be the more valuable fantasy back. Davis did score the touchdown in this game. It was an 18-yard run, so not necessarily something that Davis will repeatedly do, where I think based on the usage of Allen playing more than half of the early down snaps and Davis taking the passing down work, would expect it to be a little bit more in Allen's favor if we're in another situation where Hall misses. It sounds like they expect Hall back next week, but I think it was still worth covering because the Jets have the best schedule for running backs the rest of the way. So if Hall does miss another game, then both Alice and potentially even Davis could be very valuable in fantasy. And even if Hall is ready to come back next week, we might see some kind of rotation, in which case Allen again would be the one getting a lot of the carries on early downs, where Davis would be taking more of the third downs and seeing less of the touches. So I think Allen still has a chance to have some fantasy value this season. Next, want to go over the 49ers backfield. Another situation where there's been a ton of injuries. Jordan Mason, Christian McCaffrey ended up on injured reserve this week. If you look at the depth chart at the start of the season, Elijah Mitchell, another player who went on injured reserve at the beginning of the year and isn't eligible to come back. So we are seeing the players that were 4th through 6th on the depth chart at the start of the season playing this game. Isaac Rendo was the clear lead running back in this game for when he was healthy, which was the first 3 quarters or so. Taking a clear majority of the snaps, played 31 of the 45 snaps over the first 8 drives of the game. Overall, ran the ball 15 times, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Also caught 2 passes for 50 yards. So this was a very good game out of Grendo. A lot of the talk with him was that if he was going to have a big game any week, it was going to be this week. So that was really good to see. But then he did suffer a foot injury early in the 4th quarter, did not return to the game. So that is not great news for Grendo. Patrick Taylor was the clear backup running back throughout the game, took the rest of the snaps over those first 8 drives when Grendo was playing, only ran the ball once in that time, but then Patrick Taylor ran the ball 6 of his 7 carries in that 4th quarter. We did see Keyshawn Vaughn, who was signed to the practice squad, then elevated for this game, only took a couple snaps at the very end of the game. Brandon Allen was also in at quarterback at the time, so very clearly garbage time at this point. But it is worth noting that the 49ers play again on Thursday Night Football. It is a short turnaround, so even if it's not that significant of an injury for Guerendo, there is definitely a chance he could miss this upcoming week, in which case Patrick Taylor would probably be the lead running back. They did sign Abanikanda from the Jets a couple of days ago, so he hasn't been on the team very long. He was a healthy and active this week, which anytime a player is picked up off waivers and is only on the team for a couple of days, it is fairly common for them to be inactive. We saw the exact same thing with Josh Reynolds signing with the Jaguars this week, inactive for them. So also a chance Abanikanda is part of the team. It could be as soon as next week. It could take another week or two before they really feel comfortable with him in the offense. But if Guerendo misses time, there might not be much of a choice. So I am probably okay taking a chance on Patrick Taylor, especially with the matchup against the Rams. I think that could be decently favorable for them. It highly depends on the other running backs you have on your roster, of course. But unless there's some clear sign that Abanikanda will get a large role in this game, I would expect Patrick Taylor to see at least double-digit carries, assuming Guerendo isn't able to play. And even if Guerendo is, he might be limited, so that'll be worth noticing. Before I go to the last situation I want to cover, since I did get a question specifically about running backs, and we have been talking about running backs, I'll jump into that. Do you think Rachaad White value is up after a great performance? If Irving misses time, I think definitely if Irving has to miss time, Rachaad White's probably a must-start fantasy running back. He has been playing well all season long for the most part, playing in this reduced role in the Buccaneers offense. I think being on the field less often potentially has helped him, but also just another year to improve. He has played better. So even though Bucky Irving has been the better runner for the team this season, White is still clearly improved from what we saw a year ago. And then earlier in the season, when it was Rachaad White missing a game, we saw a lot of Sean Tucker, but I think that's because they didn't trust Irving in that full-time role yet, particularly on passing downs, where they do trust Rachaad White to take the vast majority of snaps. We saw it all of last season. We saw it again this week where Sean Tucker did play some, but not too significantly. So White is someone who could still have some fantasy value even if Irving's at 100%, just because the Buccaneers rely so much on their running backs. But even if Irving is not at 100%, if he's limited, Rachaad White is still someone that could potentially be trusted in fantasy starting lineups. So if you have White on your roster, definitely hold on to him. A chance you want him in your starting lineup going forward. Last situation I want to cover, and that is at tight end with the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll be going back to the Raiders, where we saw Michael Mayer have a huge game this week, caught 7 passes on 9 targets, 68 yards. Brock Bowers is not the best game from his standards, but he did catch 3 passes for 49 yards, which is still better than a lot of other tight ends, just not nearly as many as you hope for what we've expected out of Bowers. But this was very interesting that we saw both tight ends play over 50 snaps for a team that played just 67 snaps. 12 personnel was their base offense, was their passing down offense. It was because DJ Turner, who had been their third wide receiver for the last several weeks, basically since Devontae Adams left the team, he ended up on injured reserve. So Terrace Marshall, who hasn't been on the team all that long, was their third wide receiver. But really it was a 2 tight end offense, both tight ends running over 25 routes, Marshall only running 8 routes. So this is something that we kind of saw in week 1 of the preseason on just one drive where both tight ends saw significant playing time. We thought that could be the offense we saw the entire season. It really hadn't been since early in the season. The two are more splitting time, and then Mayer missed significant time due to a personal issue. Since then, Mayer's playing time has just risen each and every week. And with the other wide receiver ending up on injury reserve, that's allowed Mayer to see even more playing time. So not sure if we'll get to a point where we can trust Mayer in fantasy, because at this point it is just one good game. And we really haven't seen any of the tight ends who share the field have consistent fantasy value. But there's at least a chance that if Mayer puts together a good game or two, then we might in 2025 be looking for Mayer as a fantasy option, while Bowers will be the clear top tight end of next season and probably for the next several years potentially. So that covers all of the things that I wanted to touch on. Just a couple other questions from the chat before I completely wrap things up. Rest of season, would I rather have DeAndre Hopkins or Adam Thielen? Right now, I'm leaning Thielen. This is 2 back-to-back very good games out of him. He has been the top target in Carolina's offense. Only concern that I had with Thielen is Jalen Coker has missed the last 3 weeks. The two of them both play in the slot. We have yet to see both of them play in the same game and how the Panthers might rotate the players there. A chance that they might move one of them to the Z receiver spot, a chance that it'll just be a rotation, a chance that Thielen is just playing so well that even though Carolina is well outside of the playoff race at this point, that they just want to have their best players on the field to build momentum next year. But Coker did grade fairly well while he was playing. So I would think they want to try to get both players on the field. So even though Thielen has been playing very well, slightly concerned about him. Hopkins has at least been scoring touchdowns for them. A little concerned about the wide receiver rotation they've had in Kansas City. Hopkins still not playing a huge amount of snaps. I think in a game like this one they just had against the Chargers where they have to pass the ball a lot, Hopkins can still see a lot of targets, but a little bit concerned if the Chiefs are playing in a matchup where they don't have to throw so much, especially next week against the Browns. They should be running the ball basically all day, not need to throw a lot in that game. The Texans the following week should be a close matchup, and then the Steelers the week after that. But the Steelers have also been fairly good at shutting down wide receivers. So I'd probably prefer Thielen because of that, mostly because of the schedule, and I better trust Thielen to continue to see a lot of targets than I trust Hopkins to continuously see targets. But that's my thoughts there. And then the last question I want to cover is with the Seahawks situation. How worried should we be about Zach Charbonnet and his performance? We did see early in the season, Walker missed 2 games. Charbonnet was on the field a lot in those 2 games, and we saw the same thing here. I think they trust both running backs. I think it depends heavily on Walker's health. If they think he can be very close to 100%, then I think Walker should be just fine. I think they still view him as the top running back since we have seen Charbonnet play well before this season and Walker remain the clear lead back. And Walker has played well at points this season. So I'm mostly concerned about Walker's health because if Walker is not 100%, we might see a point where the Seahawks trust him to play because they need him to play because they're trying to win the division and everything, but they might not put him on the field as much as we're used to seeing. So I think I would put a lot of weight in both what the Seahawks are saying, how much he is able to practice or not practice in the coming week, as well as what the reporters are saying. If they're saying he is playing but on a snap count or if he's a full go, and also what the coaches are saying in general. So I think a lot of factors over the course of the week will play in to how much I would trust Walker. But I think it is fair to say to be worried, but I'm worried more so about his health in general, more so than Charbonnet playing well this week, leading to Charbonnet seeing more playing time. I think Walker's playing time will still be dependent specifically on his health. I still think they trust Walker. So that will wrap things up here. That covers it for the recap today. Rest of the week should be fairly normal. We'll be on the waiver wire podcast on Tuesday morning with John, and John has his usual IDP episode that'll be up tomorrow morning, as well as his IDP episode later in the week, as well as his start sit later in the week. I do want to point out I did make a change to my start sit article this week. Made the change because I was getting a lot of questions where I'd be asked if you should start or sit someone, and I'd be telling some people to start this player, other people to sit the same player. Because there's such a wide variety of leagues, I didn't like the idea of anymore saying these are the clear players you should be starting and here are the clear players you should be sitting, because I'm sure plenty of you are in a number of leagues as well where you're in leagues where there's different sizes and the players you're picking up off the waiver wire, for example, in one league are different than in other leagues. So I mix that up, and part of me mixing that up is I am asking for people each week which players do you want me to write about, so I know which players will be most beneficial to you, to say how they compare against other players. So I will both be asking in the PFF Discord. If you aren't part of the PFF Discord as well, I posted a link on my Blue Sky earlier today, PFF Nate Jahnke. Also, if you don't want to ask on Blue Sky, or if you don't want to ask on Discord, I will be asking on my Blue Sky as well. I'll be mostly rounding up those players on Tuesday. So if you have a player that you don't know if you should be starting or sitting next week, definitely let me know on Tuesday, so that increases the chances that I'm writing about the player. And then you can read about the player in the Start Sit article, and I can hopefully help you in the fantasy playoffs. And that will cover it for this week. I will continue to have this show for the next 2 weeks, just to let you know. The week after that, so week 17 with the fantasy playoffs, since the recap is, while I'm recapping what happened during the week, it's also kind of a look ahead of what this means going forward, because after the fantasy championship game, there is no going forward after that point. So we will be here for 2 more weeks and then back again next season. But thank you for everyone who has been listening. For those of you who listen live and asking questions, really appreciate it. Anyone who watches or listens after the fact as well. If you are watching on YouTube, of course, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I know a number of people have been listening, haven't subscribed yet. That is a huge help to us if you are able to do that. And also any comments, we try to answer any questions there. So if you are listening after the fact and have any questions, we will try to get those answered too. So again, I hope everyone got what they needed to make the fantasy playoffs. If not, hopefully you are able to get what you need Monday night. And with that, peace out.